Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third and final day of our Symposium, Reimagining Musical Programming. Welcome to the Sydney Conservatory of Music. My name is Neil Perez da Costa. I'm Associate Dean of Research here, and I'm going to be chairing this session. And I'd like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation on whose land we're actually running this program. Over the last 3 days, we've had the most wonderful time here. We've heard amazing presentations, and last night we were regaled to the most spectacular Hook lecture keynote by Dr. Nicole Cherry. If you didn't get a chance to see it, I recommend having a look. It was very inspiring. And I'd like to point out this beautiful nui that we have in the room. It's the last day we'll see it here today. It's a boat, the type of boat that would have been seen in Sydney Harbour with families fishing in them and cooking their meals and things like that. And we started our program with a presentation up in the gardens with the harbour behind it. It was absolutely wonderful. So today, we're starting with three presenters this morning, and the first one, I'll just find it again, is Xiao Dong from China. Xiao received a Master in Piano Performance from the Royal Conservatory of Brussels in 2017 and a Postmaster Artistic Research Diploma with a project on the interpretation of Franz Schubert's piano music, for which a very high distinction was received. Dong has worked as an accompanist in the Music Academy of Wolu Saint-Lambert in Brussels and has played as a soloist in concerts in Belgium and China. He is also an organist and has given recitals in churches in Brussels. And currently, he's undertaking doctoral research at the Université Libre de Bruxelles and the Royal Conservatory of Brussels. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dong with his paper, Mendelssohn's Concert Programming, Interpretation and Improvisation.
Hello everyone, I am Dong Xiao from University Libre and Royal...
Sorry, one more second, here we go.
Hello everyone, I am Dong Xiao from University Libre and Royal Conservatory of Brussels. In this video, I'd like to focus on one particular performance of Two Songs Without Words of Felix Mendelssohn, given by the composer himself in 1845. We will find that the instrumental practice of Mendelssohn may well be a source of inspiration for modern musicians, especially pianists who want to make their performances more original while respecting the aesthetic principles of our time. When we talk about the piano music of the Romantic era, we will probably mention Chopin, Liszt, Schumann, Brahms, and so on. Compared to them, the status of Mendelssohn's piano works is somehow less elevated. Nowadays, he is better known as the composer of concert overtures and symphonies. Still, the songs without words remain an important part of his output, and as a well-established pianist, Mendelssohn played and improvised on his songs without words on many different occasions. The career of Mendelssohn is particularly interesting for our study because he was pianist, organist, composer, conductor, and teacher at the same time, and his serious attitude towards the interpretation of classic works makes him quite modern compared to his contemporaries. So, his treatment of his own works may serve as a good example of how a serious musician of 19th century with a conservative taste played in a concert. Fortunately, we have a very detailed account of a performance of Mendelssohn on December 5, 1845, for a concert at Gewandhaus in Leipzig. The account, given by one of his students in Leipzig Conservatory, William Rockstro, is quoted in quite a few musicological works. For example, Clive Brown's A Portrait of Mendelssohn, Kenneth Hamilton's After the Golden Age, Romantic Pianism and Modern Performance, and Larry Todd's article, Mendelssohn's Lied ohne Worte and the Limits of Expression. In his article, Todd analyzed briefly the possible programmatic connection of the two songs before went on reconstructing the interlude improvised by Mendelssohn between his two songs, according to the description of Rockstro. So here's what Rockstro wrote in his biography of his teacher. Mendelssohn's own contribution to this performance were his first concerto in G minor and a solo for pianoforte, which consisted of two Lied ohne Worte, number 1, book 6, and number 6, book 5, both evidently chosen on the spur of the moment, and rendered intensely interesting by a prelude and interlude, such as he alone could have improvised. During the course of a long and masterly modulation from the key of E flat to that of A major, he carried on the quite semi-quaver accompaniment of the first lead for some considerable time, without interruption, treating it with new and unexpected harmonies, so contrived as to permit the continuance of the bell-like B-flat in the form of an inverted pedal point, and always presenting the reiterated note in some novel and captivating position. As the modulation proceeded, the B-flat gave place to other notes, treated in like manner, and presently these were relieved by a new figure, which rapidly developed into the well-known feathery arpeggio of the famous Frühlingslied. Everyone thus knew what was coming, but no one was prepared for the fiery treatment, which first worked up this arpeggio form into a stormy climax, carrying all before it, and then, as it gradually approached the long-expected chord of A major, died gently away in a long-drawn diminuendo, so artfully managed that when the delicious melody was at last fairly introduced, it sent an electric thrill through every heart in the room. This was indeed a gentlemanlike modulation, never to be forgotten by anyone who heard it. And here's another account given by Rockstro, this time of Mendelssohn's piano lessons, so that we know where the expression gentlemanlike modulation comes from. More than once, the lesson was devoted to extemporization upon given subjects, during the course of which Mendelssohn would sit beside the improvisator and, without interrupting the performance, suggest from time to time certain modes of treatment which occurred to him at the moment. He once gave the writer a theme consisting simply of 3 Cs, a dotted quiver, a semiquiver, and a crochet, and afterwards extemporized upon it himself, using the 3 Cs as the initial notes of an enchanting little melody, which he worked up into a species of Lied ohne Worte. On other occasions, he would take 2 well-defined motives and work them up into a model of the sonata form, in order to show how much might be accomplished by very simple means. He insisted strongly upon the importance of a natural and carefully arranged system of modulation, and would frequently call up one pupil after another to pass from a given key to some exceedingly remote one, with the least possible amount of apparent effort. On one occasion, when the writer had failed to satisfy him in an attempt of this kind, he said in English, "I call that modulation very ungentlemanlike." We can see that improvisation plays an important role in the practice of Mendelssohn, and his practice corresponds well with his teaching. Obviously, he thought that a pianist of his time should have a certain knowledge of improvisation, and hence found it necessary to teach it during the piano lessons. We may say that, for Mendelssohn, a strict and serious rendering of scores and the improvisation could perfectly coexist. And according to Rockstro, it was the improvised interlude between Opus 67 No. 1 and Frühlingslied, which made the performance intensely interesting. As the composer of these 2 songs, Mendelssohn clearly thought that he could still go further in the search of expression. Playing the 2 songs, apparently, was not enough. What amazed the audience was what was not written in the score. Let's analyze briefly Mendelssohn's performance and strategies. First of all, he played 2 songs without words and improvised an interlude all by himself, without asking the audience for a theme upon which he would improvise like many pianists did. And he did not choose a brilliant piece filled up with virtuosity fireworks. so he was in an authoritative position and felt quite comfortable playing some pieces of intimate nature and improvising. Performing some easy, even popular pieces wouldn't hurt his authority, it seems. Secondly, the two songs were chosen spontaneously and they were not in the same book of songs without words, so the listeners, without knowing what they were going to hear, would be easily attracted out of curiosity. But at the same time, the second song of the pair had to be famous enough. Otherwise, the audience would be totally in the dark during the interlude and had no expectation at all. As a matter of fact, it was the expectation of the audience that Mendelssohn played with during his interlude. What he was trying to do was guiding, even manipulating their listening. At first, no one knew what was coming next. Then he gave a hint of the song he would play, but then suddenly disappointed the audience, who was wondering, as Mendelssohn got still wild in his imagination, when and how their expectation would be fulfilled. This is a quite special experience. The audience was going through some ups and downs of emotion and would have to concentrate on what was going on the stage. The listening was intensely active. That's why when finally the listeners heard what they waited eagerly for, they felt an electric thrill through their hearts. We have seen how Mendelssohn improvised between these two songs, and we may still ask the question of how they were chosen. In his article, Larry Todd suggested that Mendelssohn might want to create a programmatic narrative similar to a design by his sister Fanny in her piano cycle Das Jahr. This is a very creative idea, and it is surely very interesting for those who want to study Fanny's influence on her brother's musical thoughts. Now it's time for us to take a closer look at these songs and to see if we can find some other clues in Mendelssohn's score in order to explain his choice. So the first measures of the famous Frühlingslied are like this. A beautiful melody, but the song begins quite abruptly, doesn't it? Apparently, there's no preparation in the score. But what Mendelssohn did in concert indicates that as a composer of this song, he thought that a preparation was quite appropriate, maybe even necessary. As a matter of fact, Mendelssohn did design a passage which can be a prelude to Frühlingslied, and we can find it precisely in the preceding song, in the same opus, Venice Gondellied. The Gondellied begins in A minor. However, the song ends in A major. Especially in the last measures, there's a series of arpeggio, a texture typical of prelude. It's quite astonishing that in this passage, nearly all the elements of the beginning of Frühlingslied can be found. First of all, the arpeggio of the accompaniment in A major. The small motives, La, Mi, and Do, La. In Gondellied, we have and in the beginning of Frühlingslied, we have and if you play the last two chords of Gondellied and then directly the very beginning of Frühlingslied, we will find that you don't even have to move your hands. However, what is more important here is the thematic connection. The concluding theme of Gondellied is And the main theme of Frühlingslied, same key, A major, even the same notes. So as we can see, there are many connections between Wernig's Gondellied and Frühlingslied, and I don't think it is a mere coincidence. Clearly, we may play these two songs without interruption, and this could well be the original design of Mendelssohn. Now, why didn't Mendelssohn play Gondellied before Frühlingslied in concert, and instead chose another song, Opus 67, number 1? I think it is because playing Gondellied is quite predictable, and it will somehow ruin the surprise. And the last measures of Gondellied are just too well designed, and there's too little room for further development. So Mendelssohn chose another song in a very distant key, E flat major, that is a tritone from A major. Don't forget that during the piano lessons, Mendelssohn asked his students to do the same thing, modulate from one key to another very remote key. And this leaves much more space for him to elaborate and modulate in his improvisation of the interlude. Besides, if we take a brief look at this song in E flat, we will find that it bears a quite striking resemblance to the other two songs that we have just mentioned. The song begins like this. The descending motif Re, Si, La, Fa and its variations recur several times in this song. And in the measure 8, we have if we transpose and play in A major, as you can see, this is in the theme of Frühlingslied and Gondellied. There are also some interesting harmonic connections between Opus 67 number 1 and Gondellied. The initial theme of both songs has a piquant harmony, which is the diminished seventh chord of dominant. In Gondellied, we have and in Opus 67, number 1, as you can see, these two chords are actually one same chord inharmonically. A similar inharmonic connection can be found in the climax of these two songs. We have this climbing bass line in Gondellied, leading to fortissimo and a diminished seventh harmony. In the other song in E flat, exactly the same inharmonic bass line, which also leads to fortissimo and diminished seventh. So, after a brief analysis, we can say that the three songs without words share many things in common, despite the difference of characters and keys. Maybe Mendelssohn did choose the pair of songs and improvised on the spur of the moment, but his choice could be fully justified by what he has written in the score. In this performance, Mendelssohn achieved an exquisite balance between unity and variety, interpretation and improvisation, authority and intimacy. Conclusion. What does this performance of Mendelssohn tell us, and how can it inspire us? First of all, it's not a shame to play some easy, well-known pieces in concert. In some cases, they can effectively enhance the communication between the musician and the audience. However, a careful ordering is needed so that the arrival of the famous tune has an impressive effect on the listeners. Secondly, improvisation can coexist with interpretation. We can obtain our originality through an improvised transition or prelude without hurting the content of the pieces that we interpret, which means that there has to be a coherence in terms of style, mood, and thematic material. When the improvisation is well done, the piece that we interpret can be more expressive. Finally, we may combine some seemingly unrelated pieces and take the audience by surprise. But the surprise is to be balanced by logic. An analysis of the thematic or harmonic contents can be a very good tool to justify our programming. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dong. That was a really wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it and very clear. And also, I love the way that you made this connection between both songs 4 and 5, but then also to look at how one could move from a tritone kind of harmony from the A flat to the E, to A. That's really fascinating. And I've always wondered about that in my own playing. I'd like to ask you a question, because I think this is really important. We're moving into an era now where pianists are going to be expected to prelude and interlude. It's become a thing, and I think in the next few years we're going to see lots more people doing it. Are you doing this now spontaneously in your performances? Has this analysis helped you to get to grips with that?
Good morning. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Good morning. Yeah, I have been trying to do this, but as a matter of fact, I have to admit that I have to prepare for it. It's not 100% improvisation, but as we can see in treatise of Turk, he thought it was okay to prepare, so I think why not? We have to prepare for it. And for example, I have just played organ recital, and I try to use this technique of combining, for example, the third sonata and the wedding march of Mendelssohn, and in the same style and in the same style of transition to give a little surprise to the audience at the end of the concert. I think it worked. So that's what I'm. Yeah,
that's really great to hear that you're doing that, because I've been trying to do the same thing and introduce preludes and things, and it's really difficult if you haven't grown up doing that. But I think this is a really good way of coming at it and gaining confidence. So really well done with that. We have a question in the room here.
Yeah,
Nicholas.
Okay.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me. Thank you so much for that presentation. What a fascinating topic, and how wonderfully laid out your argument was. My question to you is one to do with the order of performance of these songs without words. Do you find that the connections between, I mean, you identified some connections between, endings and beginnings of various songs without words, or motif links between the pieces. Do you find that in general those links support roughly the order in which these songs without words were published, like opus order, for instance, or number order? Or do you think they in general suggest a different order of performance, were you to play a bunch of these or play them complete?
But if you take a look at the first opus of his Lied on the Water, you can clearly see that it should be, I think it should play in the order, because if you can see the end and the beginning of the two successive songs, you can find that he really wanted to do this in this way. So I think it's well, personally, I think he was making a point by inserting a little prelude and the end, the keys and the chords. It's I think it's quite clear.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other questions in the room or at home on Zoom? No other questions? We might. 9:29. We're sort of just going on time. Shall we move on? Thank you so much, Dong. I think that's certainly given me hope for my own journey with preluding and interluding.
Yeah. So, as a matter of fact, I read your book. I read your book for my post-master program. So it was one of the first books that I read for my essay, off the record. So it's really a pleasure to be able to talk to you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. But I mean, Kenneth Hamilton's book is really the one, isn't it? Where we really get introduced to this. The value of preluding and interleading. It's really fascinating. But thank you so much. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you.